Well, welcome back to Snetterton, everybody. And what we've got coming up very shortly is our second race of the weekend for the GT Cup Championship. They had a sprint race earlier on today, and they're out for their slightly longer 50-minute two-driver pit stop race. The conditions still absolutely glorious here. We're basking in the Norfolk sunshine, and we'll see the cars heading out onto the circuit very shortly indeed. But as we say, they've already had one race today. That was the sprint race. So let's look back at some of the highlights from earlier on today. Well, in the first race of the weekend, it was Morgan Tilbrook and Ian Loggy that lined up on the front row of the grid. When the lights went out, the enormous field of cars charged their way up towards the first corner at Ritchie's. But it all went wrong when they got to turn number 2. Morgan Tilbrook was leading, Ian Loggy was minding his own business, but Ian Campbell, who was tapped onto the grass, made contact with the side of the Mercedes, and John Dillon got involved as well. In the early stages in Group GTH, there was a great fight going on for second and third in the class with the Make It Happen Mercedes of Stephen Walton under enormous pressure from the Beluga Porsche in the hands of young James Wallace, who wasn't able to test before the event because of a GCSE exam. There was also a spin for the sister car from Make Happen Racing, and in second place overall in the race, Simon Orange has got his hands full. He'd got the Ram Racing Mike Price-driven Mercedes right behind him, with the Group GTO leading Porsche of Richard Chamberlain having a great run. He was not far away either, in fourth place. Great to see the Trade Centre Formula Woman competitors finally making it to the track in GT Cup. They were having a nose-to-tail battle in Group GTH. Up to second, third, fourth and fifth in Group GTH, the squabbles still continued, as they did in Group GTC. Warren Gilbert holding off a charging Ferrari in the hands of Lucky Kira. There was nothing to choose between the pair of them for the vast majority of the race. They were locked in a brilliant battle, with Steve Ruston's number 44 GT3 McLaren not too far away either. However, it all went wrong as they went up towards Agostini. There was just the lightest of touches from the nose of the Ferrari onto the tail end of the Lamborghini. That unsettled Warren Gilbert. Through went Steve Ruston in the McLaren, and through went Lucky Kira to take up the lead of the group. The progress of John Dillon, having got involved in the first corner incident, continued. He'd now hauled the Scott Sport Lamborghini up inside the top 10. But the race was all about Enduro Motorsport and Morgan Tilbrook, who came through to claim his third overall win of the season and their fourth group win of the year. Well, that was some of the highlights from earlier on today. However, there was an amended result issued because Lucky Kira's Ferrari was found to be underweight at the end of the race. So the win was awarded to Warren Gilbert and the Top Cats Racing with Hex.com Lamborghini. Now, that is a Lamborghini that in the original race today, we were officially notified it was going to be Jensen Lund that was driving. The team made a last-minute change. That last-minute change never found its way to us or the organisers, so that was why we were misplaced the driver in the race earlier on today. We did, however, manage to catch up with Jensen Lund earlier on in the weekend, and he just showed us a little bit around his Lamborghini. So Jensen, you're back for another season in the Top Cats Racing with Hex.com Lamborghini. Complex piece of kit. Just talk us through the steering wheel controls that you have to deal with when you're out there.
Okay, well this is the Lamborghini Huracan steering wheel. We've got lots of different controls on here. We can adjust the ABS, we can adjust the traction control, and then obviously we've got multiple buttons here for radio, flashing the headlights. We've got neutral, reverse. We've also got a page button which we can scroll through the dashboard as well with different parameters on the car. Especially if we get a fault, we can see what the fault is, and is it a race finishing fault or can we drive with it? So we can scroll through there. Obviously we've got pit limiter, which we have to activate based on the speed limit for the pit lane. A little bit complicated because you have to be below the speed, so it creates a ceiling. So you have to then below the speed, press the pit limiter and then accelerate up to, I think it's 60 kph this weekend. We've also got the wiper button and we've got reverse as well. Now that's mainly if you get an incident on track. It stops you selecting reverse because obviously we've got paddle shift. And it stops you going from first down into reverse, so you have to press that button to override that. Paddle shift, 6-speed, which is left is down, right is up. It's all very simple that way, but obviously when you're that way it then becomes right up and left down, so it's but this is the standard Huracan Lamborghini steering wheel, but yeah, it's good.
I noticed the two dials in the centre, they rotate, so clearly that's for the multiple settings you'll have for both ABS and traction?
Yeah, with the ABS we've got 1 to 7, which we use for the dry. We've got 7 to 14, which we use for the wet, so we get a lot more. And for the traction control we've got 1 to 8 for the dry, and then 8 to 16 for the wet. So it's a great driver aid, but the more you bring the aids in, the slower your lap times. So if you're struggling with the car, if your tyres have gone off, or if it's a damp day, unlike today, you can use these aids a lot. But ideally, the fastest lap will be with the aids turned down as far as possible. The programs do, and then ultimately the time comes. That's where the time is, and that's why every generation of car that comes through is just getting quicker and quicker and quicker, as with the GT3s every season.
So that tells you a little bit about the controls on the steering wheel. So now let's go on board for a lap around the Snetterton 300 circuit with Warren Gilbert.
Okay, so on board now on the centre straight, coming up to turn 1. There's the other Hex.com car just to the front. Round Ritchie's third gear, looking for the apex there, and we want to run out nice and wide now. Fourth gear, fifth gear, and then we're coming into a heavy braking zone now, round Wilson. Down to second gear here. Careful on the power on the exit because it does oversteer. Third gear and then fourth gear, trying to set up for the next left-hander. We've got to be careful with the other Hex.com car. And then we've got a straight here, so we need to get on the power as soon as we can and let that car drift all the way out, and then we're going to be heading on down this long straight. So it's fourth gear now, fifth gear. I think on a good day we would actually snatch sixth gear now through Agostini down into second. Try and keep the car in as wide as we can, take some curb. Past the Marshall post 9. Now we're heading up to Hamilton, which will be fourth gear. Bleed the power on, run wide. Little snatch of fifth gear before we go through Oggies. Now this is second gear, sometimes first gear. Again, this can really catch you out on the 8 on the exit. Second gear, third gear, hold third, little flame out. Try and hold third. You've got to be very precise here. And then we down onto the Bentley straight. So now it's fourth gear, fifth gear, and sixth gear. Slowly bring the car to the right hand side. You're looking for your braking point under the bridge. This is going to be a heavy braking zone for the car. Fourth gear, third gear midpoint, and then down to second. Take the curb but watch the sausage. Third on exit, lots of curb. Fourth gear, just a lift through here, through the bomb hole, and now we're into Coram, which is where a lot of the time is made. So we tend to hold fourth or we're early in fifth. Try and keep the car balanced, but we've got to get the car straight for the braking zone now. And then this is a heavy brake, third gear, second gear, and then onto the power as soon as possible. Really relying on the traction control here. Third gear, fourth gear, looking for the line, hug the wall because we've got a crosswind today. Fifth gear, and up towards the end of the lap.
So there we go, there's an onboard lap with Jensen Lunn around this circuit, which is basked in sunshine. We've got all of the cars now nosing their way out of the garages. Maybe you're not familiar, we've just shown you sort of an onboard lap of Snetterton, but maybe we can get sort of a bird's eye view and show you what it looks like from a bird's eye perspective as well, because this circuit is, like many of the UK circuits, quite. So we're in the east of the UK, in Norfolk, and on the Snetterton 300 circuit. So the full configuration, it's 3 miles. Circuit was built in 1951. Originally, like so many circuits, was an airfield, and the 300 circuit is 3 miles long as ever, split into 3 sectors. First sector through the first 2 corners, part the way up towards Agostini. Sector 2 sees us through the middle of the lap down in towards Brundle and Nelson, and Sector 3 brings us over the start-finish line. 12 corners around this circuit, starting with Ritchie's, a very fast right-hander through the tight corner at Montreal, and then from there you'll work your way down in the tricky section at Brundle and Nelson, and Coram into Murray's as well. 2 difficult sections to try and get used to. And maybe one person that could tell us a little bit about those particular corners as well is Sam Neary, the reigning champion in GT Cup, himself and his father Richard. Sam joins me in commentary. Difficult circuit, Sam. Particularly, I'm saying Brundle and Nelson, you're trying to break a turn, and also Coram coming into Murray's for the very same reason. You're trying to rotate the car and straighten it up and brake and turn in it all at the same time.
Yeah, Snetterton is a very difficult track to get right. I always find it's really difficult to get a sort of flow around here. You sort of had to spend half a day to sort of get into that rhythm, unlike some of the other tracks around the UK. But when you do, around Snet, it is a very rewarding track. As you said, underneath the bridge, it's a very difficult braking zone. You've got to be on the brakes, then back off to try and let the nose come round and then brake again. And there's a lot of those tight hairpins which are really difficult to get right with the TC on these GT3 cars.
So that's sort of braking off, get the nose in and brake again for Brundle and Nelson. How do you attack, I don't need to give any of your secrets away particularly unless you want to, how do you attack Coram coming into the bomb hole? Is it a case of slowly increase the braking pressure as you go round there so that you're not sort of unsettling the car?
Yeah, so the bomb hole is actually just a lift. So that's a little tip for everyone.
Yeah.
It's just a lift, no brake, which is the first time you do it, it's a scary thing to do. I like to explain it as one of those paper walls. And when you're driving towards it, you think it's a solid wall, and once you're through, you think it's easy. Yeah. You don't know why you're worrying about it. But yeah, and then round Coram, it is really fast in the entry, and you sort of throw it in and hope that it sticks. And then as you get to the braking zone, you slowly increase the brake pressure, like you said, to try not to have a lock up or make the rear come round on you.
And then nice and smoothly on the power, and hopefully let the traction crack in and tidy up if it needs to.
Yeah, exactly. Traction control is the saviour for everyone.
So there's certainly going to be plenty of action out on circuit shortly, so if he's nodding off, he'll soon be wide awake, because there's a raft of GT cars heading out onto circuit. We just see the black Ferrari there, Lucky Kira. We saw him, I did speak to Warren Gilbert, who we eventually found out was driving that car. We were informed it was Jensen Lund, but it was Warren when I spoke to him. Warren did say, there was a tap on the back end of the car. Lucky Kira did tag him. Lucky was the first to jump out the car at the end of the race and go and apologise. Flip shot. So it was, the Ferrari was found to be underweight at the end of all of that, so therefore was disqualified. So Lucky's off the back of the grid for this one. Tough break really, because it's the lightest of touches, but the car's underweight, doesn't meet the technical regulations, which was how we finished the stream really, talking about the technical makeup of the cars, and he's underweight.
Yeah, as I said, the last hurdle is part Ferme, and unfortunately he stumbled at the last hurdle. As we saw on the footage last time, the tap didn't look. We couldn't actually tell if it was a tap or not,
absolutely.
Which is really unfortunate. It happens in racing. You misjudge your braking zone when you're really close to someone, and you can give the lightest touch, and it makes when you are on the limit in these cars, a little touch just push you past that, and it can allow a lot of people to make mistakes and slide.
And we saw that incident at turn number 1 where Ian Campbell was on the grass when he clobbered into the side of Ian Loggy. Ian Campbell, we gather, there was a little bit of contact between himself, and again, this is official bulletins that are notifying us this, so we're not sort of making this up, it's all official. There was a little bit of contact between John Dillon and Ian Campbell, which put John Dillon on the grass in the first place. The officials have looked at that and said there was no malice, it was just the lightest of touches again, but again it was enough to unsettle the car and put Ian Loggy out of the race. So we've got arguably one of the quick GT3 cars, Ian Loggy, off the back of the grid. Ian Campbell, quick GT3 car, off the back of the grid. Lucky Kira disqualified, off the back of the grid, and he's a quick car in GTC. So there's some quick cars to look at in this race. Thankfully it's 50 minutes. They could pick their way through the order.
It's always interesting when you see a fast car at the back of the grid. We've done it many times, and it's the first few laps are a little bit carnage to try and get back through, but everyone always has that little bit of fire when they start at the back of the grid to try and get back to the front. And it always makes interesting racing.
The real difficulty of all of those that I think, Lucky Kira is going to have his work cut out in this race, because he's got to dust himself down and get his head back in the right place after the qualification earlier. The team will have certainly loaded up the car, and maybe there's a bit of contingency in there as well now this time. But also, he won his group last time out in the pit stop race at Brands Hatch. So he's coming into this one, because he's a Pro-Am combination, 75 seconds in the pit lane, plus 20 success seconds. So even if he works his way up through the order, by the time David McDonald, the Pro, jumps on board, they've spent an extra 20 seconds in the pits compared to everybody. So he's got to do the same as well. 20
seconds is a killer. It really is in these championships. In 50 minutes in the last, you get about 30 minutes after the pit stop to try and make up that 20 seconds. Yeah. Obviously, as a pro driver, David is a good friend of mine. He's a very quick driver. So I believe he could do it, but it's not easy to do.
So just to confirm that, as this is the pit stop race, we'll just tell you a little bit about the pit stops. So if the driver pairing is a pro sporting pairing, then they will stop for 75 seconds in the pit lane. If they are sporting pairings, then they'll stop for 70 seconds, and if they are sporting pairings, then they'll stop for 60. So in other words, if you're an AM driver that's with a pro, 75 seconds. If you're an AM driver that's with a pro sporting driver, it's 70 seconds. And if it's two AMs that are driving the car, it's 60 seconds. That's how long they have to be, minimum period, stationary in the pit lane for. However, if you finished first or second or third in your group in the previous races, which were at Brands Hatch, if you won your group, it's an extra 20 seconds on top. If you were second in your group, it's an extra 15 seconds. And if you were third in your group, it's an extra 10 seconds that you have to spend. And for this year, a bit like last year, Sam, as well, we've now split this format, haven't we, so that the cars that are in Group GT3, Group GTO and Group GTC will pit first in this race, won't they? They'll pit between the 24th and 29th minute of the race, and those in Group GTH pit later on.
Yeah, which is it sometimes really doesn't help the next day when you have a shorter pit window as a pro to get out in the car and try and make all that time. This is the best day to have the 20-second penalty. if you're going to pick one of them as a GT3 car.
Of course, yeah, because tomorrow they're the opposite way around, aren't they? Group
Yeah.
GTH pit first, all the other groups pit second.
Exactly, so you get less time to try and make up that deficit.
Yeah.
So if you're going to pick a race to take the 20-second penalty, this will be the one. And what I did just notice is Marcus Clutton is not even changed yet, which is quite interesting. So I'm sure he'll be rushing to get changed and then get in the car. But we know Marcus is quick, and it'll be an interesting battle between Marcus and Michael O'Brien, hopefully.
He's got a minimum of 24 minutes to get changed yet. They're not even on the rolling lap. Fine sight they all make. Beautiful different colours. I mean, I do like, in particular, that Greystone car is always one. I've looked at that livery several times. Phil Carter's car, fantastic livery, really stands out, doesn't it? But nice to see the variety. Maybe not as many cars in terms of marks represented on the grid, because I counted up 5, I think, because we've got so many McLarens, we've got Porsches, we've got Mercedes, we've got Lamborghini, and we've got the Radical. I think that there's only 5 different marks represented this weekend, which is so unlike GT Cup, really.
Yeah, GT Cup usually has a wider range of every single manufacturer you can think of. So it is interesting, and obviously it does look like McLaren are taking over a little bit. But no, it's always nice to see the rare cars. Obviously, I do like the Mercedes the most, which is not biased at all. But no, it's great to see the 26 car grid and see them on the grid.
So then we're just looking at the number 65 car, which is Sarah Misser. She'll be sharing the car with Steph Saw, who was very quick in free practice this morning. The lap time that Steph Saw put in, I've known Steph for a while now, and I saw the lap time that she put in qualifying. In free practice this morning, hugely impressive.
Yeah, these girls have been, from what I've heard, they've just started racing, all of them, which is really interesting. You know, it's really difficult to jump into a race like this, and they both have a GT3 behind them, which you have to be wary of. But from what I've seen, they're all doing a really good job. For a first weekend to be there or thereabouts, it's really impressive.
Well, one car that hasn't come to the grid as yet, it should be Lucky Kira's Ferrari, but that's the final car on the grid at the moment. There is no Ferrari towards the back of the grid, so that's got me scratching my head a little bit. And I'm also sad to say, because I do like the car, but as I said earlier on, it's a bit highly strung, the car, really. Richard Chamberlain has withdrawn what was the Group GTO winning Porsche, the orange Porsche that won Group GTO earlier on. He's withdrawn that because of a blowing exhaust, I'm afraid.
That is a real big shame, to be honest. I do love seeing that Porsche out and when it spits flames. But yeah, sometimes, you know, you get a bit of a worry, and you have to withdraw and make sure that the car's all right for next time.
So the lights are on the safety car. The countdown board is clicking down, and it won't be that much longer before we see the cars away and onto the formation lap. Now, Simon Orange set the fastest lap in race number 1, so he takes up pole in this race. Morgan Tilbrook lies alongside, but Morgan Tilbrook, when he gives way to Marcus Clutton, that car has got 15 success seconds to carry extra compared to Simon Orange giving way to Michael O'Brien because of the relative performances last time out at Brands Hatch. So that is likely to shuffle the order to a degree. So off they go on their final formation lap. We're missing Richard Chamberlain. Looks like we're missing Lucky Kira off the back of the grid, so that opens up Group GTC to the advantage of TopCatsRacingPetch.com. In fact, there he is. He's starting from the pit lane. He's going to go off the back anyway, so yeah, start from the pit lane. Gives yourself a chance to stay out of trouble, Sam.
Yeah, it's actually quite a clever idea, because when you start a bit later, you get to keep your tyres a little bit warmer. So
yeah, we'll wait and see if that's what he does. So let's confirm the grid then. Simon Orange on pole position. Morgan Tilbrook sits alongside, and it's Mike Price and John Dillon's Lamborghini on row number 2. Row number 3 of the grid, on the inside of the third row of the grid, it's Steve Burgess, who starts behind the wheel of the Radical, and alongside him, it's going to be the McLaren in the hands of John Whitehouse for part 1 of the race. Graham Tilley sits on the inside of row number 4, with alongside him Jensen Lund, we've been informed, will be starting this race on the 4th row of the grid. And row 5 of the grid, it's number 3, scheduled to be Charlotte Birch, sitting alongside Roy Millington. The next row of the grid is where we see the number 17 car, started by Russ Lindsay, and alongside his 50, which is James Wallace, with row 7 being on the inside, Tamer Shahan, and 77 Mark Hopton. The 8th row of the grid, Philip Carter and John Curry, who drives solo, with row 9 being Tim Kresick and Kavi Junda. The 10th row of the grid is Stephen Walton and Sarah Misser, and then on to row 11, that's where we see the next of the cars coming up, which is going to be Jody Sloss I was expecting, and Ron Trenker, so I'm not quite sure what's happened there with that part of the grid. And then as we look through, then we'll have Philip Carter and John Curry alongside Tim Kresick and Kavi Jundu, Stephen Walton, followed by Sarah Mizard. Then we should get Jody Sloss, hopefully. But yes, we do. Followed by Ron Trenker, Ian Loggy, Ian Campbell, and Lucky Kira going off the pit lane area. So apologies with the graphics. That is the correct grid, and we'll wait and see as to what happens. So, Sam, who's your money on then?
I mean, the money's always on the pole sitter, but that 15-second penalty is a killer. So I think Callum McLeod's always quick. Mike Price has impressed me this weekend. So my money is on Orange Racing, I'm going to say.
Okay, I'm going to go for the Radical, because it sits on the third row of the grid. In the sprint race earlier on, it was 22 seconds off the win, but it's going to stop for 15 seconds shorter than the others, and in some cases, it's going to be stopping for nearly 30 seconds shorter. So with those success seconds taken into account, I'm going for a Group GTO win, not a Group GT3 car.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That was a really clever one. You're a good betting man.
You just don't know, do you? That's the problem. You just don't know. Any small mistake, it's a big grid of cars. The drivers have got to be on it, and they need to get the pit stops done and dusted. So the team have got that involvement to make sure they cycle through the pit stops as cleanly as possible. So Simon Orange in the dark blue McLaren starts from pole position. Morgan Tilbrook sits alongside, and then it's the Mercedes of Mike Price and the Lamborghini of John Dillon on row number 2. The red lights are on the gantry. We're about to go racing in the first of our pit stop races for the weekend. The lights go out, and the pack of cars head up towards Ritchie's corner with Simon Orange and Morgan Tilbrook, the two McLarens, no doubt side by side. Yes, they are. But it is going to be just Simon Orange that takes up the lead of the race, whilst finally leaving the pit lane is Lucky Kira onto his way. Hopefully this time they'll get safely through the first hairpin, Sam.
Yeah, it's as I said, turn 2 is always a pinch point. Hopefully we don't see a car flying into the screen. So far it looks so good, which is really nice to see. Just make it past turn 2 and then start racing properly.
Yeah, nice and neat and tidy driving already. Some cars looking to try and make progress, but that's off, and I'm afraid that is the number 64 car that's had a moment, Jody Sloss, who has lost the tail end of the car. Just gathered it up though. Maybe cold tyres, just got away from very slightly.
Yeah, it seemed like she passed the other Formula 1 car, so maybe she got a bit excited on the brakes and then expected the grip to be there when she put on the power. As you said, cold tyres is a big factor to that.
Yeah, and that's all part of the learning curve, which is all part of that process that these girls have gone through when they first entered the competition. So for the lead of the race, Simon Orange looking to try and make good his escape. However, Morgan Tilbrook's got other ideas about it. John Dillon, followed by Mike Price, then the Radical, which my money is on, in the hands of Steve Burgess for this first part of the race. I think that's another driver notification. We were told it was Steve driving in the first race. It wasn't. It was Ben Dimmock when I spoke to them over lunch. So that was another miscommunication in terms of the drivers we were notified by. All of the teams have to notify the driver, and they're notified to us, and there were just a few small errors. So over the start-finish line there will shortly come. Top 5 have sort of broken away, haven't we, from the car that's there in 6th place. So top 5, then the gap, and then 6th place is the first of the Top Cats Racing with Hex.com Lamborghinis.
Absolutely, it's great to see all the cars, through the first lap with no issues. It's a long race, 50 minutes, anything can happen, and just stay out of trouble. Hand it over to your pro and then see where you end up at the end.
And I'm afraid that is the Caffeine 6 by Par Motorsport Porsche that's got a puncture on it. Now, whether there was a little bit of contact there, maybe when the McLaren got sideways and they were trying to sort of avoid what was going on, a little bit of contact, but that Pirelli was looking rather second-hand, wasn't it?
I guess that is the commentator's curse again, where I said everyone made it through lap 1 safely. But yeah.
You're getting good at this.
I am getting quite good at this, yeah.
That'll be Tim Kresick that's limping that car around, and it's the rear that's gone. Is there more damage? Yeah. Has it creased the rear panel? There's scuff marks, isn't there? There's definitely been contact there, hasn't there?
Yeah, he has to be careful with that tyre. You really want to make sure it stays on the rim, just so you don't do any more bodywork damage or even suspension damage you can do when a tyre is flailing around like that.
So in the early stages of this race, there was Graham Tilley we just saw. He was trying to hunt down the car of John Whitehouse that lies ahead, whilst both looking to try and attack Jensen Lund's Group GTC leading Lamborghini at this stage. So it is the number 9 Top Cats Racing with Hex.com Lamborghini that is leading Group GTC. Who's leading Group GTH in the early stages? As it was earlier on, it's the Porsche of young James Wallish that leads that. Group GTO is down to, I think, just the one car now, isn't it, with the retirement of poor old Richard Chamberlain. So Steve Burgess and Ben Dimmock will be on reduced championship points, which is a bit of a dint in what they were expecting, really, because subject to the number of starters, that dictates how many points you can get in your class, and because now we've got lesser starters in their class, it means they can score less championship points.
Exactly. It's a real big shame when you don't have 3 cars in your class. I think you score half points when you don't have 3 cars, which is a shame, and it does massively hinder. So even if you win you're still getting that half points. Ian Loggy is already up 10 positions on the first lap, which is megally impressive. So I don't think we should count him out yet. Being a Justin Am, he doesn't get that pit stop penalty for having a Pro Sporting or Pro. So I don't think we can count him out of the overall win as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he came from 23rd on the grid. He'll only be stationary for 60 seconds, whereas I say others are stationary for a lot longer period. Par Motorsport going to work with Tim Krezik's car. You can see the remains of the Pirelli slick tyre on there. A little bit of damage just to the air intake on it, but don't think that will be in need of any gaffer tape. The mechanics will just have a quick look to check there's no suspension, and they should be good to put a new tyre on, bolt it on, and send him out, Sam.
Yeah, these GT cars are built strong, so hopefully it can just be put back on and out you go and go and have some fun.
So you're Jensen Lunn, you're under attack from GT3 cars in your Lamborghini. What do you do? Let them through? He's let John Whitehouse through. Is he best just to let Graham Tilley go through, or is he going to be a typical racing driver who just want to stick his elbows out and get on with it? Because he's leading the group. He doesn't need to fight these two cars, and he can let them go by. It won't affect the championship points that Lamborghini will score.
I think it's all a statement. I know that Jensen might be planning on moving up to maybe GT3 at some point, and if he does, this is just putting a marker on everyone, saying I'm in a slower car and I'm still beating you.
Well, you're saying a slower car, but you were talking about the challenge cars earlier. I was talking to Warren Gilbert yesterday, and so he was talking how nice the Lamborghini is to drive and how grateful he is to drive it. I said, well, yeah, actually, the Trofeo cars are quicker or more powerful than the GT3 cars, because the Trofeo cars have more BHP, less aero as well, so they're quicker in a straight line. Whereas, of course, the GT3 cars, you've got that balance of performance kicking in, and they're restricted to a larger degree. Absolutely.
Especially around a track like Snet, like I said, with the straights, the challenge car can really compete with them. So that's what you're seeing now. Jensen Lunn has managed to keep up. Two GT3s which are around. Oh, as we see a spin.
That is a spin, and that's Russ Lindsay that's gone round. Thankfully, drivers broke left and broke right to avoid him. That looks as though that's on the run out of Williams, maybe. And there's also damage to the front left-hand corner of the number 25 car there. That is Kavijander's McLaren that's picked up a little bit of damage. Looks superficial, that damage, but how much on a GT4 car does that affect the aero on the car, particularly on that corner?
On a GT4, they're not really known for the aero, so it shouldn't affect him at all. So hopefully we can see that. But it looks like he possibly made a move up the inside, which span the orange car. But we'll see what happened.
Hopefully there's no tyre rub as well on that front corner, as we see now Tim Krezik out of the number 86 Porsche in the pit lane. So that's a retirement, I'm afraid, for the Caffeine 6 powered by Par Motorsport, or Caffeine 6 with Power Motorsport. Porsche, that is out of the race, I'm afraid to say. So squabbles continuing. Group GTH, as ever, is providing good value for money, with Mercedes under attack from battered McLarens, and then more McLarens queuing up if they all start to squabble as well. Pushed rather forlornly back into the garage is the Par Motorsport car. Yeah, here's the squabble that's going on. The two Make Happen Racing Mercedes, followed by the Paddock Motorsport McLaren with its damage, and then it's the two Formula Woman cars that sit behind that as well.
Absolutely, it's a great experience for them to be in this sort of racing. GTH is known for being very tough racing, so for them it's great to jump in and watch them battling and maybe take a few tips and then hang back and look for the gap and then make the move. So for them, I think it's a great experience.
Progress continues for Ian Loggy. The number 16 Ram Racing Mercedes is now going to be up into probably 8th position, because they've both got past Jensen Lunn on that lap, who I think probably let them through. Now, if he didn't, then he needs to get back on it again, because as soon as he's let those cars through, if that's what he even did, look behind him, it's the red Ferrari of Roy Millington. That's another car that runs in Group GTC. It's a Ferrari specification, isn't it? A one-make spec car. So that Lamborghini needs to stay ahead of that Ferrari.
That's the issue when you let these faster GT3 cars around you, and you sort of let your mind go a little bit to let them past, and it really can take you out this rhythm that I was saying you need at Snetterton. And once you're out the rhythm here, it takes a long time to get back into it. And that could be what you're seeing now with Jensen Lunn.
It's good to see Jensen back, actually, because he didn't do the full season last season, and he's been given some good news this week. So yeah, really pleased that it's a big thumbs up from the medics with regards to Jensen's health. New fastest lap of the race last time through, Morgan Tilbrook, 1 minute 50.746. Now that doesn't count for anything in this race, as up the inside goes Ian Loggy, puts a position over on Graham Tilley. So Ian Loggy now from 23rd position on the grid is now up into 7th position. You did pick him out as charging his way through the order. I thought he would do it, but he's done most of it in the first 8 minutes of the race, which is staggering.
Yeah, it is staggering. I didn't expect it to be this well, and he just passed Graham Tilley, just saw, and for Graham this is a great opportunity to watch Loggy who is one of the best AMs on the grid, watch him in the same car and try and hook onto the back of him and try and keep up with him and then let him drag you through the field as well.
Yeah, Graham Tilley, new to this car as well, isn't it? So previously having raced the big old Nissan with us in the past, but this new GT3 Mercedes for him this year, which he's still getting to grips with his co-driver Will Tregurtha that shares it with him for this weekend. So yeah, sit behind Ian Logie and he'll learn a chunk or two, won't he, Graham Tilley, who has never won a championship. He's been racing for a good number of years now, Graham. He's in his early 70s, isn't he now, Graham? But still absolutely as sharp as a nail, as bright as a button, and very quick behind the wheel.
Yeah, we were saying about how Ian Logie is incredibly fit. But you just look at Graham Tilley. I think he could out bench press both of us as well. He's an incredible man, and I take my hat off to him. To be driving a GT3 at 70, it is incredible.
To want to do it, to enjoy doing it, to have the capability, because everything happens so quickly. You've got to be on it mentally and also physically to be able to cope with it as well. He's another driver that works really, really hard at his fitness. So the first 10 minutes of the race have now taken place. We've got the car of Jodie Sloss now, after the problems earlier on, just beginning to edge up onto the coattails of those around. So she's not that far off from the tail end of the number 25 Paddock Motorsport Kavi Jundu driven McLaren. So might be a place or two to pick up here for the Formula Woman car.
It looks like she's just, we saw her have that big slide and lose position to 65, so it looks like she has passed her teammate again, and now it is just hooking onto the back of those cars in front and looking for the gap and looking for the mistake. It's the first race for them, so trying to find the gaps is it's a new ball game for them. They've been lapping round, so trying to work out where you can pass in these GT4 cars is it's a different ball game, but hopefully they can take this first race and learn from it.
Back for the lead of the race. Here we go as they start to turn their way onto what will be the Bentley Straight. Simon Orange is still under enormous pressure from Morgan Tilbrook and isn't going away at all, is he, as they then start to head with the sun glinting off the windscreen down the Bentley Straight and in towards that section you were talking about where they're on the brakes, pitch the car in, off the brakes, back in. So out of Brundle, out of Nelson, starting to head their way back round there, and as they now turn their way up towards the end of the lap, Simon Orange doing a good job of hanging on to the lead.
I think it's incredible to see both of them racing. They're both very at the top of the game, and it's incredible to see these two AM drivers who are, if you look at the AM drivers now, it's really taking off in these championships, and it's great to see these two sort of setting the benchmark. As we see Marcus Scotton, we see Morgan Tilbrook turn into turn one. He needs to make sure he's braking later than Simon Orange into this corner to try and get the run onto this little straight. Then you're into turn three, which is really terrible in these GT3 cars when you're following. You get a lot of aero wash, which is a big issue in these. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't think the aero is a big thing, but in these GTs, they just seem to use so much of the flat floor. When you take it away, they do get a lot of understeer.
Well, you look at where GT3 cars were, when they were first started to homologate them back 15 years ago now, they were entirely different beasts to the modern GT3 cars. The aero has come on significantly on them, and even the newer GT4 cars now, the aero on those is back where GT3 was 15 years ago, isn't it? So it's almost a GT4 car, it's like a 15-year-old GT3. Exactly.
If you look at the GT4 times now, they are matching the old GT3s, which is it is gobsmacking to think that they are at that level, and GT3s are just a different ball game. In the amount of grip they have.
We've had another place gain for Ian Logie whilst we're looking at the race leaders. He got up the inside of John Whitehouse and is now looking to disappear away. There was also a change for fourth position because Mike Price's Mercedes, the green number 11 car, was holding fourth place, but through has gone. The Radical in the hands of Steve Burgess. So he is still only 6.7 seconds off the leader at this stage. And remember, Simon Orange, when he gives way to Michael O'Brien, that car's going to have to stop for 15 seconds longer than the Radical. So, yeah, might not be a bad bet I've put on there in the end.
I think it's going to be a very interesting race once the pit stops have played out. You sort of get to see where everyone actually is then, and you get to see the cars absolutely on the limit with the pro drivers in. We know Michael O'Brien is very quick, and we know Marcus Clutton's very quick. But I wouldn't, as I said, I wouldn't dismiss Callum McLeod in the Mike Price car, and then Ian without that pit stop penalty. I think there's a lot to go on now. And your Radical bet could be right up there.
Yeah, we've still got another, 10 minutes, though, before the pit window opens at this stage. So it's 26 minutes remaining when the pit window will open for the cars that run in Group GT3. Group GTO and Group GTC. That pit window will remain open for 5 minutes. When the pit window closes for that batch of cars, then the pit window opens for the second batch of cars, which is all of the cars in Group GTH for this weekend. So it's done for safety reasons. You know, particularly here at Snetterton, the pit lane is quite small, it is quite tight. By having 2 separate pit windows, not everybody descends on the pits at the same time, and it just makes it safer for everybody, doesn't it?
Exactly. We've seen a lot of issues in pit lanes in a lot of different championships. So GT Core they've done it very cleverly and just split the groups, and they change it each day, which is the fairest way to do it. And you know, if you are pitting, if you're one of these AM drivers, you pit straight away. Try and get the pro in as quickly as possible to try and gain as much time.
But if you're one of those driver pairings where you're an AM pairing in reality, then you can it opens up the pit window to a larger degree, doesn't it? Not by much, because it's only a 5-minute window, but you can pit a couple of laps later, and if both drivers are of a similar pace, it shouldn't matter. And I think that's where we'll see Steve Burgess and Ben Dimmock maybe tweak things a little bit, because they're both AM drivers. They are both of a reasonable pace as well, aren't they?
Exactly. You can be very clever. If you pit 1 lap later, you get into the pit lane right as they're leaving, and they cannot let their car leave in front of you. So you can make them lose a couple of seconds if you just come in a lap later, which is a really clever idea. We've done it a few times and it always sort of works out. So there is definitely a different strategy, which always makes it more interesting.
The number 61 car of John Dillon now coming under an ever-increasing amount of pressure from Mike Price, because through on this lap to gain a further place has gone the Radical in the hands of Steve Burgess. So that is now up into 3rd position. There goes the Lamborghini, shadowed by the Mercedes, for what is now a fight over 4th and 5th position. So group leaders leading the race overall, leading Group GT3, Simon Orange. Up to 3rd now, leading Group GTO, is the Radical in the hands of Steve Burgess. Leading Group GTC is still Jensen Lunn at the wheel of the number 9 Lamborghini, and leading Group GTH, twas ever still, James Wallace, who has so far, I think, been leading that group since the very beginning, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think so. It's great to see all these different battles going on track. That's what I'm really interested in. You're seeing the lead battle, and now that the back markers are coming in. This is, as I was saying, it's really nice when you're car behind and you see the front car always has to pave his way through the grid. So you sort of get a free pass through and you say, thank you very much, I'll take that, and then look for the gap.
And over the years, you know, look at some drivers that might not be as quick on outright pace, but if their traffic management is better, that pays dividends, doesn't it? Particularly in endurance racing. And you know, this is a 50-minute race. We're talking this and even longer durations.
Yeah, it's so important, traffic management. It is one of the most important things. Everyone could be quick over 1 lap. Well, not everyone. But it's not the skill is always to be quick over 1 lap. It is to manage traffic and find your gaps, and also have the confidence in your car to maybe brake later than you think it can, and then just to stop it and lose a little bit in the exit, but just to make that pass.
So this is what John Dillon will need to do very shortly, because there's a raft of traffic coming up. It's not as bad for the car that lies ahead, which is Steve Burgess, because you know he's leading the group. He can afford to, and he's got a bit of a gap between himself. He can afford to pick his place, but it really depends on where John Dillon and Mike Price meet this traffic. If they meet it on the approach in towards Murray's, that's going to make it interesting. And where are they going to meet it? The approach in towards Murray's. So John Dillon sneaks past Ron Trenker. Mike Price can't do it, and that's exactly what you're talking about, Sam.
Exactly. He didn't make the best move then. You know, John Dillon got through, and Mike Price just couldn't, which is the real shame. Usually when you're that close, you can get through as well and sort of barge your way a little bit through, but it didn't work out that time, and as you saw, John Dillon got a good gap.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. So still other good fights going on further down in Group GTH. This is Mark Hopton's car, who is having to stick his elbows out. He's got the 2 Make Happen Mercedes sitting behind. Then it's a Paddock Motorsport Kavi Jandu driven number 25 car that sits right behind that. Sorry, it's Mark Carter's car, isn't it? I said Mark Hopton. It's Mark Carter's car that is there. So that is going to be for 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th in Group GTH, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great to see this battling in GTH again. Obviously, the Porsche is very quick and the Mercedes are very quick. But it's great to see all these different manufacturers. And we talk about the BOP in GT3. We'll talk about the BOP in GT4. It's also incredible.
They've nailed it last year. They nailed it this year.
Exactly.
In GT4, yeah, absolutely. Or Group GTH as it's known. So that was the leading car in Group GTH. Now, is that going slowly? No, that was just getting out of the way from the traffic there, I think. No, that car is going slowly, isn't it? It's clearly a problem for Russ Lindsay, I think.
Yeah, I think so. We saw him with that little spin earlier on in the race, so that might not have been contact.
It looked to be porpoising quite a lot, didn't it?
It did look like it was porpoising, which could be a rear suspension. It could be anything to do with the car. So we'll see if he comes into the pits. Hopefully the team will have a look round. and hopefully it's nothing major, but usually when it's doing that, it is quite a major issue.
We're talking about Ian Loggy having to charge his way from the tail end of the field. Well, what about this man here, the number 23 McLaren in the hands of Ian Campbell, who has got significantly less experience driving GT3 cars than Ian Loggy has got. He's only stepped up to GT3 this year, having been in GT4 cars previously, but he's kept his nose clean again. He's worked his way inside the top 10. He's about to overtake the Group GTC leader. Not a bad drive again from Ian Campbell, bearing in mind his still relative lack of experience.
Not at all. He's really impressed me this year. Really impressed me how he's jumped in one. He's been really quick. This is where you see the difference between Ian, who has been driving it for many, many years, and Ian Loggy, who's been driving it for many years, and Ian Campbell, who's just jumped into it. The traffic management, as you see, Ian has made it up all the way to 6th, and Ian has made it to 10th place. And it just shows the difference of when you get confident with the car. Yeah. And I have no doubt that Ian Campbell will get there.
Oh, I think he'll get there within the next year or so. Yeah, absolutely. It's coming brilliantly under the tutorage of Ollie Webb and Greystone GT in general. So we've got, 4 minutes before the pit window opens, plus a little bit of change. Here's the American Ron Trenker. Nice to see Ron back out with us again in the GT Cup Championship. But yes, Russ Lindsay, that car is still trying to limp its way back. There's no obvious signs of anything that's wrong with it that I can see. I'm looking for things that might be dragging underneath, the same as you're doing, Sam. Why is it when we bend down we think we can see lower? Doesn't work when it's a TV camera, Sam, does it?
No, we're both here bending down trying to look underneath it. But yeah, no, I couldn't see anything visibly wrong with that car, which is actually worse sometimes, because it means it's either electrical or some sort of engine or gearbox issue, which always costs a bit of money.
Here comes the traffic management again, and vital Morgan Tilbrook, albeit he took a big chunk of curb there and that unsettled the car. He did get back past one of the back markers, though, before they got in towards Brundle, which Simon Orange didn't, but then he made a mistake.
Exactly, as it's just been proven, the traffic management has saved Morgan Tilbrook then, because as you hit that curb, if he was right on him, he would have made the pass.
And that's the sausage curb as well, which doesn't do the Pirelli tyres a great deal of good when you clobber them. Thankfully, they're higher pressure now. If it had done that beginning of the race, it could be a different story. Into the pit lane comes number 17, Russ Lindsay. We also saw the Ferrari of Lucky Kira in the pit lane as well, so that's 2 cars that have had issues. Pit window isn't open, so these are unscheduled stops for those 2 cars. Out of Ritchie's corner goes Morgan Tilbrook, leading the way from Simon Orange, who is still the fastest man on track at the moment. And we've also got not only in the pits, but that number 17 car receiving a penalty for track limits, which seems a bit harsh, really, bearing in mind they're probably out of the race.
Yeah, as we were saying in the first race we watched, these hot days, they do push the cars to limits, and it's sort of getting shown now. The tyres will be getting really hot at this point, so luckily they'll be coming into the pits soon. Most of the teams won't change tyres. So they've got to let them cool down a little bit in the pits, and then as the pro driver gets on them, the Pirelli tyre screams for help.
So somebody was telling me in another championship that this tyre, the drop-off is probably earlier, but then once it's dropped off, it actually seems to come back to you again later on in the stint.
Exactly. When you have a full tank, it seems that maybe the 30-minute mark, you lose everything. It's still heavy on fuel, and you've got no tyre grip. Once the fuel comes down, the weight's out the car, it seems like it comes back to life and has a new lease of life for the last 5 or 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden it drops to about 3 or 4 seconds a lap slower.
But on the whole, it's a big improvement. You like the tyre?
I like the tyre for 1 or 2 laps, and then I'm not so keen.
I think the actual construction of the tyre is very similar. It's just some of the chemical components that have gone into it that have altered it as a different compound. So we're looking at Jensen Lunn, who's still doing a really good job at the wheel of the Lamborghini, which still continues to lead Group GTC at the moment. He did have the Ferrari of Roy Millington quite close to him, but he seems to have gapped him now quite significantly, and also starting to gap Mike Price now, and that green Mercedes is the Lamborghini that lies ahead in the hands of John Dillon, because again, traffic management from John seems to have been a little bit more effective than Mike Price, who, if you meet the back markers in the wrong place, Sam, there's not a lot you can do about it sometimes, is there?
Not at all. It's the most frustrating thing as a driver when you're just stuck behind a GT4 car and you cannot make the move. All you want to do is give them the little nudge just to move on, but it's not going to work. You just got to sit behind them and then wait for the gap to appear.
And all of the time whilst you're sitting behind, you know that you're losing time, aren't you, to those ahead of you and to those behind. Looks as though the number 17 car has been ushered back out of the pit lane, but the way that car's coming back out the pit lane, I don't think they've sorted the problem, Sam.
No, it doesn't look like thought at all. As we see the battle for the lead, really close.
Here comes Simon Orange. I thought he was going to try and sneak up the inside, but the door was always going to close. He's right onto the rear bumper almost of Morgan Tilbrook as they thread their way out of Agostini. All of this with the pit window now only 50 seconds away from opening for this batch of cars. So I don't think Morgan Tilbrook and Simon Orange are going to be able to come into the pit lane at the end of this lap, do you? Is it going to be 40 seconds from where they are to get over the start-finish line? Probably could be, you know.
It's
Might be open for them.
It could be open for them, but it is, if it's very close, it is a big risk. Sometimes you might try to stay out one lap, especially with these quick cam drivers, because they're only maybe a second off the pro. You're only going to lose a second if you stay out one more lap. Whereas the risk if you pit early is a pit stop penalty.
Yeah, you cannot break the beam at pit lane entry when there is anything less than 26 minutes remaining in the race. The pit window only opens in the 24th minute. You come in at 23:59.999 before the pit window opens, and it's quite draconian, the penalty in reality. Now they are, I think, going to just make it, aren't they? Because the gap is at the line is at pit lane entry, so they could come in this lap. So sensible thing would be Morgan Tilbrook to come in, hand the car over to Marcus Clutton, wouldn't it? Because of course they also have 15 success seconds they need to add into that one as well. Yeah,
exactly. It's just the worst nightmare you've just seen on the TVs when you see a slow car, you just come into the pits and you're hoping there's not a safety car going to come out. I don't think there will, but for race engineers it is a nightmare.
Yeah, it looks as though they were both in. Yep, so both of the McLarens pit. As I suggested, the Radical stays out as well because they're an AM pairing, so they can open up this window to a larger degree, whereas anybody that's an AM Pro pairing wants to get the Pro in as soon as possible, which means that John Dillon comes in to hand over to factory Mercedes driver Andrea Amici. Mike Price comes in to hand over to Pro driver, which is Callum McLeod. So they're all diving in. Another car I saw that stayed out was Jensen Lunn on that lap. So the Top Cats Group GTC leading Lamborghini stays out as well.
Yeah, that's the smart thing to do. Stay out the trouble. Oh. As we see a lot of dust.
Stay out of trouble, which somebody was very close to not doing that. All right, okay, it's one of the Formula Woman cars. I'm afraid it's a number 65 car, which is Sarah Mears that's pointing the wrong way. Caught the moment though, because that would have been a very quick moment at Ritchie's.
Yeah, turn one is a very scary corner if you go off. The barrier on the right hand side always seems to drag you in. For some reason it just seems to have that sort of magnetic pull for cars to hit it. So luckily she's not hit the barrier, she just had to fan reverse and get back going again.
Yeah, so a good save, spiked the heart rate slightly, but yeah, very, very good save. Now Ian Loggy now at the moment is up into second place. In fact, is the car going to get going again? That's the problem. What we don't want is a safety car now with that car stricken there. No, well done to Sarah. Gets the car fired up, gets it pointing in the right direction. Might be a bit of debris and dust, not just on the tyres, but on the track, so everyone else will have to be careful when they get there, but the car's pointing in the right direction. So that averts a safety car for sure at that point.
Yeah, exactly. You're just hoping you haven't flat spot the tyres. That is the biggest risk when you have a spin, as we see both cars leaving the pits, and that's going to be a really interesting battle.
Yeah, wait and see as to how they resume their respective battles when they get back out on track. The pros getting behind the wheel. Simon Orange giving way to Michael O'Brien. Look at the dust that's on the circuit there. How much does that affect you? How much when you come into Ritchie's, which is such a quick corner, can you see that when you get there at that point? I assume you're just blind and you just have to work it out when you get there.
That's the issue with these cars. You are blind 90% of the time. You are guessing most of the track when you do see things. Debris is very hard to see as well. So you're sort of just going on instinct, but you do get really good feel in these cars for what the car is doing. You know, the TC and the ABS, you can adjust it and fine-tune it perfectly so you have the maximum amount of grip.
Yeah, but there's not a great deal you can do if you meet marbles and debris midway in a corner when you're committed.
Exactly.
You just got to try and work it out and hang on to it.
Exactly. With these cars with the aero, it's the way I explain it is you've got aero and mechanical grip. Trying to get back to that mechanical grip when you're carrying aero speed, which is 40 mile an hour more, you need to lose 40 mile an hour to then have grip again.
Yeah.
Which is almost impossible when you're going flat out.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it? The faster you go, the more grip you get. You just got to work your way through thinking it won't do it, it will do it. Yes, there we go. And Ritchie's is a fine example of that, isn't it?
Yeah. Ritchie's is it's always a corner where you go into it and you always think you can carry more speed. Yep. And then you get on the power and then you're off the track. Yep. It always catches you out.
It lulls you in, doesn't it? And then spits you out the other side on occasions in an entirely different direction to the way you went in. So how's Michael O'Brien getting on? Well, that car has now served its pit stop. Ian Loggy has been in. Now, Ian, remember, is driving solo, so he only has to stop for 60 seconds. He did not compete in the final pit stop race at Brands Hatch, so he's not carrying any success seconds. So Ian Loggy arguably is stopping for 30 seconds less than other cars have been doing. And you can see as he trickles his way out of pit lane now, there goes Michael O'Brien, not that far up the road from him. So it's coming. Your man's on it.
Yeah, I did put my money on Michael O'Brien at first, and I always put it on Loggy. So if I can get a 1-2, I think
You've
I
gone
should take
each
this
way,
up.
have you? Right.
Exactly, I've taken 2.
I've gone on the nose, you see. I've put it all on.
You've always got to put 2. You've got double the chance of winning.
I still never learn, do I? In is the Radical. So Steve Burgess finally comes in, multiple Radical champion over the years, former British quad white champion as well was Steve Burgess some years ago, and he's handing the car over to a fellow Radical champion, Ben Dimmock, who raced in the Mini Challenge a few years ago. So they will come into the pit lane vacating the lead of the race. Now, if Jensen Lund doesn't come in on this lap, that will put the Lamborghini not only into the lead of Group GTC, which is held for a good number of times, but it will go into the lead of the race overall. But it can't really afford to. It's got to come into the pits, doesn't it? Because the pit window closes, 21 minutes to go, and that's a problem. Is that rear toe link or is that a puncture?
That looks like a rear wishbone. It looks like it's crabbing a lot on the rear, so it's either a rear wheel's loose or it looks like a top wishbone has failed.
Right.
Which is very interesting around Snetterton. There's not many bumps to hit. Maybe the sausage curb underneath the bridge you could hit.
Yeah, and you're not really loading up that side of the car.
Exactly, and they didn't also change tyres, so it's a weird one. That it could just be a failure, but usually they don't just fail by themselves. It usually is from a hit of some sort. So maybe he got hit to start the race, and it's sort of now came to fruition.
Into the pit lane comes Jensen Lund. I didn't see what time was remaining on the clock when he entered the pit lane. It would have been close. It would have been close is all that I'm saying, and I genuinely don't know what side it would be. So yeah, Callum McLeod limping it round. Now, thankfully, looking at where he was limping that round, that hopefully went at a slow part of the circuit, because if you suffer that kind of failure at a quick corner, and particularly where that suspension is either loaded or unloaded, that's going to grab your attention, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can see the rear wheel looks like it's on a negative camber, which is showing that I think it's a top wishbone that's failed.
Yeah, because it's brought the whole wheel over. So now that the pit window has closed for those cars that run in Group GT3, Group GTC and Group GTO, it now opens up for those that are running in Group GTH. So into the pit lane comes one of the Formula 1 machines, and that is going to be the car that is about to be taken over, number 65 car by Steph Sort, who was indecently quick, wasn't she, as we mentioned earlier on in free practice this morning. So it'll be interesting to see how Steph gets on when she gets behind the wheel of that.
Yeah, as we saw all those cars in that sort of train, be interesting to see if she can catch up to that train, if it does form again, and try and make some moves.
And because those cars are new entrants for this weekend, it doesn't mean they don't pick up some success penalty. They pick up 60 seconds, which is what they'll get for the driver pairing, but they'll get 7 seconds as a new driver entrant into that category. So that is the extra few seconds that they have to pick up, just to sort of give them at least a little bit of something to make sure that they don't run away with things. So more pit stops happening in Group GTH. I think the vast majority of the Group GTH stars at the sharp end have come in. So leading Group GTH now, I think, is going to be John Curry, isn't it, in the Make Happen Racing Mercedes, because he did not come in. You can see the pit lane is full of everybody else. Yeah,
and as you see, John Curry also drives solo, which again is sort of the same Ian Loggy case. Maybe he can get a really short pit stop and hopefully jump to the front, and then there'll be maybe a bottleneck with the pro drivers, and it'll make a really interesting race after these pit stops.
So, second of the Trade Centre Formula 1 cars into the pit lane. We've got the Trade Centre Wales and the Trade Centre UK car, or Trade Centre English car in the pit lane. So they'll be heading back out. Andrea Amici, I mean, what's not to like about the way that Andrea Amici drives the Lamborghini? These are like a pair of slippers for him, these cars, aren't they? Andrea Amici, who was the Super Trofeo champion in Asia back in 2018. He was the GT Asia champion in a Lamborghini in 2016. He was the European Super Trofeo champion in 2015. There's not a lot that he feels uncomfortable about when he's inside a Lamborghini, and it shows when he drives it.
Yeah, he does like the Lamborghini badge. You do get used to having a badge in front of you when you drive these cars. Obviously, mine is Mercedes. I jump in, I see that badge, and I know what I'm doing. So it does help when you're constantly driving the same brand of cars. As we see an overtake from Mark Sun, and sadly the Radical has gone off track, but it's back on.
And back off again, nearly there. Yeah, Ben Dimmock. I think small mistake there, wasn't it, from Ben Dimmock? And yeah, that's all changed now. So it means all of a sudden Marcus Clutton now has gone through, and Ian Loggy has gone through ahead of the Radical. So that is rather undoing what I was hoping really, when it comes to who I thought might win this race. But the Radical got up there. It did get up there. I thought it would do over the course of this one. We've also got Will Tregertha now fighting away with the number 44 car, which has now been taken over by Steve Ruston. So Will Tregertha, former Ginetta Junior champion, then stepped up the next year and won the British GT Championship in the GT4 category. He's on board that Mercedes. But for the lead of the race, I think it is going to be Marcus Clutton, isn't it, that may well be leading the race with Ian Loggy over the course of this lap. They were in the opposite position last time round, were they? Or was Michael O'Brien leading?
I believe Michael O'Brien is leading.
Michael O'Brien, yeah.
As I said, I put my money on them to start, so
all right.
Hopefully I'll be running to the betting machine after this and take my money.
Good job it was virtual money here in the commentary box. Money to money, hey. Over the start-finish line they'll come. Michael O'Brien does lead the race. It is Marcus Clutton in second place with Ian Loggy in third position. I mean, what a charge from 23rd on the grid to Ian Loggy. Hats off to him. Ben Dimmock, with the small mistake, drops the Radical down into fourth place. Might have lost a couple of places on that lap, but they still lead the group. They're still on for, albeit reduced championship points. And now we've got the pros behind the wheel. New fastest lap of the race comes in for the car in eighth place, number 23, Ollie Webb, 1 minute 49.384.
Yeah, that's quick from Ollie Webb. It's really good to see that he is in the car and he's going fast. Obviously, it's not in a position they'd want to be. I'm really looking forward to seeing the Lamborghini catch Ian Loggy and see what can happen there, because it should bring quite a few of them into the mix and it should make a really interesting race.
I love the second half of these pit stop races because it's an entirely different dynamic, isn't it? Into the pit lane with the pit window closing any second, so just having made it in, conducting a pit stop and back out again, goes one of the GT4 McLarens. That's one of the Paddock Motorsport cars, so that was one of the later pit stoppers to come in and serve the pit stop. That's the number 25 car, which I think is now Adam Hadfield, who has taken over that car. Adam's another former champion, isn't he, in GT Cup?
Yes, yeah, Adam Hatfield won with Chris Murphy back in 2018, was it, I believe?
Now you're asking if I put my thinking cap on. Yes, you're absolutely right. It was 2018, yeah, and they're Aston Martin GT4.
Yeah, I should become a commentator, shouldn't I? I should.
I'll watch my back then, you know that invite for tomorrow, nearly. So final few pit stops just taking place now. John Curry, you said, you know, he is driving solo. Can he afford to open up the window? He can also afford to try and, I'd like to take a well-earned drink, but the straw needs to come out the bottle. There we go. And now, if he can finally find the right place to put it, there we go. So John Curry taking a well-earned drink. These cars, you know, it's worth saying, in these conditions, you know, these cars, they do have aircon, some of them. Some drivers might have cool suits, potentially at this event or other events. They're still warm, aren't they? Ridiculously warm with the heat soak. Yeah,
these cars do get ridiculously warm. And, you know, a lot of people think you're just sitting in a race car and you're just moving a few pedals and moving the steering wheel. It is a very, very physical job. The cars can get to at least, the way to work it out is at 30 degrees on ambient. Yeah. So if it's 30 degrees outside, it's 60 degrees inside the cockpit. And then imagine you're trying to press the leg press with one leg for 100 kilos every time you press the brakes. They are extremely physical cars. And then you add on top the G-force, and yeah, it is a proper workout driving one of these.
And the fact that you can't dissipate any of that body heat when it builds up as well, because you've got the balaclava on, you've got the crash helmet on, you've got the fireproof underwear on, and a 3-layer Nomex suit on as well. There's nowhere for it to dissipate, is it? You just get warmer and warmer and warmer, nothing you can do. And the last thing you want to do is, you know, look on the McLaren, there's a little sliding window. Slide the window back, but it is going to affect the drag.
It will do. It will do. With the drag on these cars, you know, they are built to be almost the perfect machine in a wind tunnel. As soon as you put down that window, it just becomes a big kite, and it's a big issue. But yeah.
Michael O'Brien doing a good job threading his way through the traffic. Here comes Marcus Clutton, former British GT champion, who's gone well in British GT with this car, and Morgan Tilbrook so far this season. They're sitting there in second place in this race, though. 8.5 seconds was the gap. Now, Marcus Clutton was 0.2 quicker, and now we've got Ollie Webb trying to sneak up the inside of the number 44 car of Steve Ruston. Not surprising Ollie made it through. Steve is a really good driver, but he is a gentleman driver, whereas he's up against the pro, and, you know, someone likes of Ollie who's raced at Le Mans in the past.
Yeah, Ollie is a very well-established driver, and it's really good to have him on the grid to sort of bring up this level of driver that's in the grid. But yeah, Steve is a really good driver.
Former champion, you know.
Former champion, exactly. And, you know, as an AM driver, if you're 1.5 or pro, you're doing really well. That is where you need to be.
Well, he held him up for a couple of laps. Ollie Webb couldn't do anything about picking the pocket of the number 44 car, so hats off to Steve Ruston. Yeah, Steve Ruston and John Whitehouse, who's still racing together in this race, were the 2019 champions Then it was Simon Orange who scooped up the championship, and last year it was you and your dad, wasn't it? So you've got quite a few former overall champions, let alone group champions, in the field this weekend.
Yeah, there is a lot of group champions in the field, which is great to see. It's great to see people keep coming back to GT Cup, and it just proves how good of a championship it really is. It shows how fair it is and shows that everyone is really happy. Just keep coming back. And as you see, the racing is just getting better and better.
It is, yeah. There's still some squabbles to be sorted, though, and scores to be settled with 12 minutes remaining. Marcus Clutton looking to try and close the gap on Michael O'Brien. He did do it last time around, to a reasonable tune as well, but that's probably affected by traffic. And, of course, you might lose time in traffic one lap in the case of Michael O'Brien, but then that Marcus Clutton is going to lose it a couple of laps later on. And did see, going back out into the race, the black Ferrari as well, so that'll be David McDonald that will now be on board that one. We thought we'd retired that car, but it's back out. However, we are going to retire another Ferrari, because I noticed that Benny Simonson is in the pit lane at the wheel of the car that was started by Roy Millington. Yeah, so we get one Ferrari back in the race, we might be losing another.
It's a real shame to see. I think that might actually be a stop-go penalty. But it does show how much this heat can affect these cars. We are seeing a lot of cars have issues, but I think he's just coming back out to the race. So it'll be interesting to see the lap times between Benny Sampson and Dave McDonald and see who is the fastest out of both of them.
Let's just have a quick look. Let's see what's going on with Michael O'Brien relative to Marcus Clutton. Well, the answer is that Michael O'Brien lost time on the previous lap. What does he do on the next one? And that's the sign of a pro driver. Pops in the fastest lap of the race that we've seen so far. 1 minute 48.490. That's the way to respond to hitting a bit of traffic and knowing that you need to get back on with it.
Exactly. You get told by the team, they say you lost 1.5 seconds that lap, and it can just make you go into some different level of driving. As you see, with a 7-second gap, you do you save the car, you don't use all the curbs, and you sort of just going to bring it home mode. But when you need to, as he's just shown, you can switch it on and set the fastest lap.
It just goes to show the fact that you were talking about the Pirelli tyre does drop off, but then it comes back, and here we are. So long into this race, and it's still capable of doing a purple lap time. So yeah, hats off to Michael O'Brien. 27 years of age now, Michael. Seems to have been around forever, but he's still in his 20s, is Michael. So yeah, let's see whether he might be able to stroke that car home for a win. What's going on in Group GTH? Well, we saw there was a good fight going on earlier on in Group GTH. Well, we've still got some good battles now going on as well. The number 25 car now in the hands of Adam Hatfield is trying to work its way past one of the Formula Woman cars. That would not be for position, that would be to place a lap on it. At the sharp end of Group GTH, it is still the number 50 Porsche that is leading, which is Sam Meyer-Lachlan.
Yeah, you just saw car 17 going back out as well.
Yeah.
So that car seems like they fixed the issues, which is nice. So for tomorrow, they can all have a beer tonight and not worry about it. And, they go again racing tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point that you make there, because if you can get the car out and check that everything's okay, it means tomorrow when we have a very short practice and then we're straight into quali, the car's sorted. Whereas if they didn't get the car back out tonight, you've only got that very short practice session, which is 10 minutes to make sure you've got everything sorted before qualifying. And if it's not sorted, you've got no time to sort it then. So yeah, really important to see that car back out. It
just lets everyone have that little bit of a break tonight as well. They've been here for a few days. Just chill out and know the car's safe for tomorrow. And as you said, 10 minutes isn't enough time to fix anything on these race cars. They are very intricate cars. The thousands of bolts around this thing. You need to take off to even reach just a radiator. So it is nice just to get the car out, make sure it's still running, and you go again tomorrow.
You said that Orange Racing, powered by JMH, were on the radio to Michael O'Brien saying, "You've lost time, Michael, you need to speed up," and he did it. The following lap, I'm guessing that Enduro Motorsport were on the radio to Marcus Clutton saying, "Michael O'Brien's just set the fastest lap, you need to get on it," because what's he done now? We've now got Marcus Clutton with the fastest lap, 1 minute 48.423. Impressive lap time, that, isn't it?
It's always a great feeling when you're in the car and you get told you just got the fastest lap, and then you hear the next lap that they've just been beaten again, and you get into this sort of race. But if you were Michael O'Brien, would you jump into this race? I wouldn't. I would back off a little bit, bring the car home. He's got a 7-second lead. There's 8 minutes remaining. He's not going to lose a second a lap. So I'd just bring it home and just make sure you get max points. But as a driver, sometimes it does get into your head and you just want to go flat out and get the fastest lap.
Greystone have been on the radio to Ollie Webb to tell you what's going on, because he's now got the fastest lap of the race, 1 minute 48.297. Here is the Top Cats Racing with Hex.com. Warren Gilbert driven Lamborghini. Now that is still running inside the top 10. It's in 9th position by the time it has been into the pit lane and served its 60 seconds that it would need to do. And it's now looking to see whether it can head towards a winning Group GTC, which it did manage to take earlier on as well.
we know how consistent they are in that Hex.com car. They are really consistent. Last year they were title contenders with us. So if they can just keep doing what they're doing, hopefully they'll be in a shot for the overall at the end of the year.
And at the moment they're running around ahead of a car that they need to try and scoot their way through and past. So yeah, sensible driving there for the number 64 car. Erica Hoffman behind the wheel of that one moves out of harm's way and allows the quicker cars to thread her way through. 7 minutes of this race to go. It certainly looks as though Michael O'Brien has everything under control, doesn't he? He can afford to just take his time working his way through these back markers because he's built a 9.5 second advantage. It has increased, hasn't it, over the last few laps, because Marcus Clutton set the fast lap and then hit traffic and has now lost time again.
It's so easy to lose time in these cars. Even round Coram, you can easily lose 2 seconds compared to a GT4. You know, a GT3 is lapping almost 10 seconds a lot faster. So 10 seconds around 2 minutes is very easy to lose when you're stuck behind one for even one corner. And as you've seen, that's where Marcus Clutton's time has gone. But as you see, Ollie Webb has just set a 48.2 again, showing that the tyre does come back at the end of the race.
But that's part of the attraction and charm of GT racing, is it? That it is multi-class. You know, it's not like a touring car event where everybody's in the same class. You know, you've got different cars that you need to deal with, and as frustrating as it is, it wouldn't be GT racing if you didn't have that.
Yeah, obviously, when you're in the car, you do not want a car there. You get really annoyed when you see a GT4 in front of you when you're on a fast lap, but for racing and for adding it and making opportunities, it's brilliant. It adds such an element to the racing, and it's always, it's just really good to watch.
And they're having their own race as well, so you've got to bear in mind that they're driving flat out. They can't drive any quicker than they're doing already. It's just that you've got more aero, you've got more power. So here we come down the Bentley Straight with Ben Dimmock looking to see what he can do. He's not that far off the coattails of Andrea Amici, you know, so factory Lamborghini driver under pressure here from the Group GTO Radical, which again, you know, is a very different car to all the rest of the cars. Now, Radical did build a car that was badged as a GT3. It was never GT3 fully homologated though, was it? So it wasn't able to be classed as a full GT3 car. So that's why this car runs in Group GTO. It's a great car. I absolutely love it. Had a passenger ride in one in the very early days. Ridiculous grip. Ridiculous grip.
They all have ridiculous grip now. It's all gobsmacking, but it is great to see that car pushing this Lamborghini to the limits. And you know, the homologation system on these GT3s, when you get into the Polo card and all that, it is a very difficult test to get through. So it's great to see that it's still out here racing in GTO and competing with GT3 cars.
Number 14 car of Michael Broadhurst now looking to try and attack alongside the Make Happen Racing Mercedes. Side by side through Hamilton. That's a brave move because it does start to get slightly narrow on the exit of that one, but looks as though they both made it through there. That's not a move you usually see very often, is it? Side by side through Hamilton. Takes some doing.
I don't think I've ever seen a move through Hamilton like that. That is a very impressive move from Michael Broadhurst. So it's good to see sort of racing like that, and that is what GT Cup offers. That sort of racing in places I've never seen overtake. It just happened.
So we're into the final 4.5 minutes of this race. Michael Broadhurst, having gained that one place over the Mercedes, has now managed to pull away from it to the tune of an extra couple of car lengths. The order still sees Michael O'Brien leading Marcus Clutton from this car here. Ian Loggy at the wheel of the number 16 Mercedes, who has not really put a foot wrong. He didn't do anything wrong in race number one. So it's just unfortunate that he was wrong place, wrong time, and got taken out by Ian Campbell, who was also wrong place, wrong time. But for Ian Loggy, that's the way to bounce back, isn't it? You know, it will have annoyed him. You know, I know Ian as well as you do. That will have annoyed him earlier on, but he's managed to get his head back on, concentrate, and has driven brilliantly in this race.
Definitely, I think this has actually been one of the best performances we've seen from Ian in this championship. You know, he's kept a cool head. He started last, and when you're at the back of the grid and you see all those cars in front of you, you sort of believe it's game over before it even starts. But he's kept his head down, and he's got the car into P3, and it's really impressive drive from him.
Well, if you consider that Ian Loggy, yes, okay, he stopped for 15 seconds less in the pit lane than Simon Orange did, giving way to Michael O'Brien, who are the race leaders. But he's only 19 seconds behind them, and he's had all of that overtaking to do.
Exactly, you can so easily lose seconds upon seconds overtaking cars. He really could have been in a shot for a win in this race.
Yep.
So I think tomorrow will be really interesting. Obviously, if he does finish third, he'll have a little bit of a pit stop penalty tomorrow, but it'll still be less than most people. So hopefully Ian can have a really good qualifying tomorrow and see where he ends up in the race.
Feed him some raw meat tonight, stoke him up in the morning and put him in the car and see what he can do. So 2 3/4 minutes to go. Down in towards the braking area for Brundle and Nelson comes the race leading car, which is the orange powered by JMH McLaren, in the hands of Michael O'Brien, who has driven faultlessly in this race. Former British GT racer, first appeared in Formula Ford and BRDC Formula 4 briefly did Michael O'Brien, and had a quick go at mini racing a mini challenge JCW cars, but then switched over to sports cars really in 2018 was, I think, the first time we saw him in a GT4 car. But himself and Simon Orange over the course of this season have been a really, really good partnership. And another driver I'm impressed with also is Ian Campbell and Ollie Webb, the way that those two have bounced back up to 7th place from the very, very back of the grid.
Yeah, and as you said, you know, with Ian Campbell's very limited GT3 experience, to make those passes, to make the critical passes to get into 7th place, you know, he's played his part massively in this, and going from almost last to 7th place, it is impressive.
So, with a couple of laps to go now before we're done and dusted. There goes Will Tregurtha, who has managed to get himself ahead of Ben Dimmock on that lap. So the Radical has lost the position, but still will keep the same amount of championship points. And we've had another spin, I'm afraid to say, for the number 65 car, which is Steph Saw, who's rotated the Trade Centre Formula Woman car. But for Will Tregurtha, place gained at the wheel of the number 4 Mercedes, which sounds absolutely thunderous as it heads over the start-finish line. Now, that is up to 5th position now for that car. That's the old Sam de Haan car from last year, isn't it?
It is, and you can still see the pink headlights in the front of it, which is quite funny. But yeah, so that was a very successful car in British GT. And then Graham Tilley bought it at the start of this year, and so far it looks like he's getting to grips with it, and hopefully by the end of the year, Graham can be fighting against some of these AMs and give Will the car to be fighting for the wins.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. Wouldn't surprise me if they pick up a win by the end of the year. But about to potentially pick up another win is this car here. It is going to have to do one further lap thereafter. Now, bear in mind that Simon Orange and Michael O'Brien were leading the Group GT3 Championship by just 6 points going into this race. Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Clutton claimed the win earlier on, so that closed up the championship even more. Now they're going to finish in the opposite order this time around, so it's going to be back to the same amount of points that are separating them. And we see this year after year after year in GT Cup. It all comes down to the final championship race of the season. Another off for Ben Dimmock, so that's unusual to see Ben have a couple of offs in the same race. That was a more major off than the first one, where he just seemed to outbrake himself.
Yeah, as the tyres get hot in these temperatures, it's still maybe 20 degrees, 19 degrees. The rear tyres do seem to get really hot, and it is quite difficult sometimes to miss your braking point. Once you miss your braking point by maybe a metre, it just gets exaggerated because you're going maybe 2 or 3 mile an hour faster. So that could have been just what it was.
But thankfully he's gathered up the moment, so it might have cost him a place. It's not going to cost them any more championship points, and they're still on for a reasonable haul, given the reduced amount of entrants in Group GTO this weekend. So Michael O'Brien threads the car out of Agostini, still using all of the curb, and probably a bit more than I expected there as he came out of the corner. But it looks as though himself and Simon Orange are on course to claim what for them would be their second overall win of the season. And it is the second time that they'll have won a pit stop race, because they won a sprint race at Donington Park when Simon Orange would have been driving in round 3 of the championship. But they did win the first of the 2 pit stop races at Brands Hatch last time out with the GT World Challenge Europe. So good haul of points, and as you well know, Sam, consistency as well, because that car that leads the race has failed to finish outside of the top 5 at all so far this year.
That is a really impressive figure. It's so hard to be consistent, especially with the 20-second penalty, to constantly finish in the top 5. That is the most impressive thing I think they've done. And they've shown that they are a really good combination together.
They've only finished off the overall podium twice, 1 5th and 1 4th. A staggering performance, and they're about to add another podium to that, and it's going to be the top step of the podium because the clock has ticked to 0. Michael O'Brien works his way out of Murray's onto the centre straight and up towards the checkered flag. It's a 3rd win this season in the GT Cup Championship for the pairing of Simon Orange and Michael O'Brien, and sets the fastest lap on the very last lap of the race, a 1 minute 48.076. And that sends a message out for tomorrow, Sam, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's always nice when you do it on the final lap, because you don't let anyone else have a chance to even try and beat it. So it does just sort of lays it down what you can do, and go on, chase that, boys.
There you go, there's something to do for you tomorrow. The car of Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Clutton finished 2nd in the end, albeit 12.5 seconds adrift. Ian Loggy, hats off to Ian Loggy. He's going to scoop up 3rd place after the disappointment from earlier on. That'll put a smile back on the Scotsman's face. We need him to take the checkered flag, which he does now, comes over the start-finish line. We've still got our Group GTH leader as well to take the checkered flag as well. He's still flying around at the moment, which is going to be Sam Mayer-Lachlan and all of the hard work that James Wallace did in the early stages of it as well. So they'll work their way over the start-finish line to claim the win in Group GT8. The Group GTC win has gone the way of Jensen Lunn and Warren Gilbert in their Top Guts Racing with Hex.com Lamborghini. Group GTO will go the way of Steve Burgess and Ben Dimmock. Ben still yet to take the checkered flag, though. Hasn't come through as yet to take the checkered flag in 7th position. I think it was just because of his track positioning with where he was relative to the race winner. So should be over the start-finish line any second now to claim the win in Group GTO. Now, that car is a long, long way offline. Trying to pick up any little bits of marbles that it can to make sure it doesn't fall foul of weight, Sam, there.
Exactly. As you saw in Parc Fermé, it's so easy to be minimum on weight. And, you know, if they're running it close to the BOP, maybe 1 or 2 kilos here and there, it is nice to pick up that little bit of rubber because it can make a big difference. I've once been 0.2 over the weight limit, so and that was with picking up rubber.
Right.
So it is really key just to do what he's doing now.
Yeah, just pick up all of those little marbles that have been shed off the tyres while they're circulating around, and it all adds to the weight of the car because it's on the car when you're heading towards Parc Fermé. Yes, so interesting that we still see people doing it and have the mindset to do it at the end of the race. You know, you're pleased you've won, but you've still got a job to do. You've still got to do that on the slow down lap, and then fingers crossed that once everything's confirmed, you can head towards the podium. So we should be able to confirm some results for you very, very shortly for what was a great race in the GT Cup Championship here. Our first of 2 pit stop races this weekend. Of course, we'll repeat that format tomorrow. We'll have, and it won't be televised, but we will have the warm-up and qualifying in the morning, followed by a sprint race and a pit stop race. But let's confirm the results for you. It is Simon Orange and Michael O'Brien that claim the win from Morgan Tilbrook and Marcus Clutton in 2nd place, and Ian Loggy from the back of the grid in 3rd. John Dillon and Andrea Amici were 4th, ahead of the Graham Tilley and Will Tregurtha combination, with Ian Campbell and Ollie Webb also off the back of the grid to finish in 6th place. Steve Burgess and Ben Dimmock won Group GTO in 7th place from the car of Steve Ruston and John Whitehouse, and it was Jensen Lunn and Warren Gilbert that claimed top honours in Group GTC in 9th position ahead of Roy Millington and Benny Simonson. Outside of the top 10, Charlotte Birch and Charlotte Gilbert were in 11th place. James Wallace and Sam Mayer-Lachlan picked up the win in Group GTH in the number 50 car to finish in 12th place ahead of John Curry, Mark Compton and Ewan Hankey, Phil Carter and Michael Broadhurst, and then it was Stephen Walton and Chris Hart, and you can see the rest of the finishers from there on in, all at least either 1 or 2 laps off the race. But that was a great way to end the first day of racing here at Snetterton. Sam Neary, who continues to join me in commentary. A couple of good races in. Shame you're not out there, Sam, but hopefully you've enjoyed joining me in the commentary box, and you very graciously said that you'll do it tomorrow as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my time in here, so thank you very much for having me. It's obviously a different side of the GT racing, so hopefully I can get a little bit better tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to it.
Looking forward to having you as well. So that's it for today from the GT Cup Championship here at Snetterton. But don't forget, we've got it all to do tomorrow. So please make sure you join us for tomorrow's races here in Norfolk. Until then, goodbye.